Video is now recording, so I'm going to dive straight into it, and then we're going to wow everybody. I think that's what we're going to do. That's the plan. This will be a wow episode. Here we go. Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast designed to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is a podiatry legend. His name is Dr. Richard Blake. Now, I'll look at it this way. If you do not know the name, it means you're only in your first week of podiatry and you're studying. That's the only reason why you wouldn't know my guest's name today. So, Richard, how are you doing today?
Very good, very good. I've had a good day out here in California.
Yeah. So you were just saying you've cut back in your work a little bit. That you were full time and now you're sort of going sort of part time. You've got to see how you're going to cope with all that.
Yeah, This month is my first month of probably 70%, and hopefully next year 50%. So I have more time to write and lecture and.
So is that part of it? So you're cutting back on your workload on a clinical sense, but are you hoping to spend more time at the university teaching the students?
That is correct. That's my true love. I've been involved with our local podiatry school for now 40 years, and I was a part-timer at the school for about 12 years, and doing practice part-time.
Yeah.
And then I went to full-time practice and just went into doing guest lectures, but now I'm more formalized. I do biomechanics workshops to every student that goes to the school. So it's been really fun at this side of my career.
Okay, so you're at the California School of Podiatric Medicine. Have you always only lectured at that school, like predominantly as a paid position?
Correct. And I'm actually a volunteer now.
Oh, you're a volunteer.
I'm a volunteer. I'm that old. So, the old people, they figure they can get some free service from, which is.
So where did you study and when did you graduate?
So so the school used to be in San Francisco called the California College of Podiatric Medicine. That's where I went.
Yeah.
I graduated in 1979, before most of the people, including you, were born.
No, I was born. I was born well before that.
Oh yeah, 78.
But I'm going to take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And that's it. And so the school was sold to Samuel Merritt University in about 15 years ago, and so they run the education now for the local podiatry school. But now there's 3 West Coast podiatry schools. There used to be just one. There's one in LA and one in Arizona. So we've gone from a whole 7 podiatry schools, I think, to 10 in the country or something like that. It's still a small band.
Yeah.
Podiatrists.
Well, I think the same thing happened in Australia. There was one school like in each capital city, but now there's multiple schools in different states. There's a lot more now than what there used to be when I went through. So out of curiosity, why podiatry? What was it that interested you in the first place?
Yeah, for me, it was, I was an athlete. I played baseball in college. I ran marathons in college, and I looked at regular MDs, and I just didn't feel any excitement. I actually like physical therapy,
yeah,
and thought of physical therapy as an option. And I sort of look at myself as half podiatrist, half physical therapist. But it was meeting a podiatrist, Dr. Harry Levac, and was one of the who's a podiatry legend for sure. And Harry, he was at my running at a race, and I went up to him. I said, "Could I, visit you at your office?" And I'd never looked. That was June of 76 or 75 probably. And I've never looked back since. It's just been the most wonderful career that I could ever have thought of.
So that was your first exposure to podiatry. So obviously it was a positive one.
Yeah.
So then you started podiatry itself. When you graduated, did you have, like with what you're doing now, did you have thoughts on that's where you'd end up? Or did you think you would end up working in a hospital or just having a sports clinic? Did you ever pitch yourself like doing lecturing and having the career that you've had, which has been a big career over 40 years?
Yeah. So I always wanted to do sports medicine. That was my why I went into podiatry. A lot of podiatrists wanted to go into surgery, and that wasn't. We're all trained to do surgery, but I probably did a handful of surgeries in the first few years of practice. It was always sports, sports medicine gear. And so I took the biomechanics fellowship out of the school, taught by Dr. Ron Balmasi, Dr. Merton Root, Dr. John Weed, Dr. Chris Smith. And I think one of my teachers was Dr. Rich Bogdan, who ended up going down to Australia for a while to practice.
Okay.
But so anyway, California was the place to be, to learn biomechanics, to learn sports medicine. Sports medicine was just starting as a practice. And I went from, that residency and fellowship to work for Dr. James Garrick at St. Francis Hospital. He started the first he started the first practice in sports medicine in a medical school in 1968, before anybody else knew about sports medicine.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, he was an incredible guy, and just retired a few years ago, about almost about 80. So he kept going for a long time. So we had a nice 35-year relationship. So the clinic that he worked at we're all independent contractors. It was not a traditional practice, but that was the framework and that I've been in for 40 years now. So it's just what I know, type of thing.
Yeah. So when you had to study podiatry, and you said that when you graduated, surgery wasn't something that you really wanted to pursue too much, it was more the sports and the biomechanics. Knowing that you had to do surgery going into it, did that put you off at any stage? You thought, oh, I really don't want to do the surgery, but did you just do it anyway?
Yeah, I think when you go through school and that, it's like you actually convince yourself that you are a great surgeon. I like doing it.
Yeah.
And technically, I was an athlete, so I think I have good hands. I could sew a good knot. I could, but really, I was working on my inverted orthotic in those days, trying to perfect that, and just everything I read was non-surgery. I joined the National Sports Academy, eventually became president of that. Just, like 99.9% of my time was sports medicine. And that had to become my focus. So I wasn't good at rheumatology or surgery, in the long run. or vascular conditions, when you specialize in something, you have to know who's really good at it, that you can refer to. So, because these patients come into your office who need, diabetic care and surgical care and other things a podiatrist's office. So,
It's good to know your strengths, though. That I think it's really important to know your strengths and what you're interested in. I talk about it a lot, about niching your practice. If there's certain parts of podiatry you really enjoy, put a lot more focus into that and put less focus on the stuff that you don't enjoy. And eventually your career and your business or wherever you're working will build up around those things you enjoy doing more of.
Yes, if you're passionate about what you do, and that's going to spill over to the patients. The patients are going to know that you're passionate about a certain aspect of podiatry, and they're going to get the benefit of it. Plus, they're going to, that's the way your practice will head in that direction.
So around 1981, you started the inverted orthotic technique. What was going through? What was the thought process that you were thinking that drove that made you decide to start doing that, and then to actually give it a name and then put your name to it and push it out there? That's pretty ballsy to be doing stuff like that.
So actually it was 1981.
Yeah.
So I just, as a podiatrist, had just joined a orthopedic clinic, and Dr. Garrick and the other orthopedists would give me all their knee and hip problems that were either they were trying to either avoid surgery on for some reason, or after surgery, their patient was still having problems and they were trying to, alleviate the pain. So I got good looking up the chain, and I started inverting people. The tradition was, don't go more than 3 degrees, which was a Root theory, that if you go more than 3 degrees of inversion, the patient would sprain their ankle and cause lateral instability. So I had this patient who ended up getting a 24-degree inverted orthotic, and so I first made a vertical orthotic that didn't work. And then I made a 4-degree orthotic. Luckily, it was just for his one left side.
Yeah.
I made an 8 and a 12 and a 16. I kept measuring his heel position, getting his feedback on it. This was over about a 4-month period. We finally, going up 4 degrees, we finally came on 24 degrees eliminated his knee pain, and his everted foot was more straight. So that's when I knew okay, there's times we can break these rules. And I started trying to figure out when I could do that, because Steve Subotnick and Harry Levac and runners in general would get inverted varus wedges, and we call them runner's wedges. We were always varusing people for running. We couldn't measure because we didn't have the sophistication of what the angles we were putting them at, but we would wedge them, 4 degrees, 6 degrees, 8 degrees, and so we're always going that way. So anyway, so by 1985, I had enough patients that I decided to write the technique down, but I needed the blessing of the guru of podiatry, biomechanics, Dr. Merton Root. So I drove up to his lab, and his lab had made these orthotic. I'd already taught the lab how to make them.
Yeah.
And he was shaking his head. What's going on here? Is there any liability in this? So, but I went up to him and I presented him the work, and actually brought a few patients up for him to see them on that his lab had made. His son was running the lab pretty much by then, Jeff, and he was my biggest critic at the beginning, and he was my biggest advocate within a very short time. And boy, was he a researcher. I hope the people like Hiron down there and Daniel Bonero, who I've met, and some of these researchers that you got down in Australia are wonderful. But Mert would tear everything apart. And so I went up for 2 years. I drove up, his lab's about 100 miles away. I drove up every weekend that I could, and we'd sit down and we would talk for 16 hours. I was his, he was doing this for, as a courtesy of his heart. And we teared apart everything, and he'd tell me what to work on. And he said, no, this doesn't make sense. Oh, we got to explain this better. And so we finished the paper in again, probably about a year. And the paper was 26 pages. The title was The Inverted Orthotic Technique. And so when I gave him the final paper, he threw it back at me and says, there's no way you're calling it the inverted orthotic technique. And I like, what do you mean? He goes, no, this is the Blake inverted. This is the Blake orthotic. It's not, it should have your name on it.
Yeah.
You've done the work for it. Anyway, tell me if I'm rambling too much.
Oh, no, I'm actually, the only reason I'm not cutting in is because I'm loving the story. And because what happens is you hear these names, like going through university, and you hear the certain names that sort of popped up and who did certain things, but you don't hear these backstories. And I'm absolutely loving it. So yeah, if I'm just standing here and I look like I'm stunned, it's because I'm intrigued with what you're saying. So keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, so we submitted the paper to our national journal, and about maybe 6 months later, we get the response that your paper has been accepted for publication. And so that was the first paragraph. There's 4 paragraphs in the acceptance letter.
Yeah.
Paragraph 1, we've accepted your paper. Paragraph 2, 3, and 4 were criticisms of me on how I dare, how very poor judgment I used to call it after myself. That it's up to the profession to call it, its name. And of course, Merton Root's name was not on it. He said, Rich, this has to stand alone. This is not, this is your technique.
Yeah.
It's not Rich Blake and Merton Root, it's Rich Blake. And so anyway, so they chewed me apart right and left and said, we're not calling it, we're calling it, rename the paper. So I put it back to the inverted orthotic technique and resubmitted it. And so they call and they say, your paper is going to be in the, whatever, a month. So I'm waiting anxiously for this paper. And, 26 pages of this paper, it went through every little thing. The paper that was printed, it shows the bias of the profession and how radical this idea was. It came out, it was 2 pages. Basically, it was the abstract. It had a few other things, but the abstract in it. And this is my paper. So I was devastated to say.
Yeah, I was going to say you would be after all that work, and then they just take it 26 pages down to 2 pages.
Yeah, and that was totally. I mean, they didn't tell me. They didn't say, you know, we're accepting it, but we're gonna take it down to 2 pages instead of 26. Because
So, but going back to the time that you did this, was this 1981 that you wrote the paper, or was this a little bit later?
So this is 1985, and it came out in 1986.
Okay, so how many years had you been practicing by the time you came out with this?
4 years.
Okay, so you and the people that were reading your paper and who were making the decisions, how many years had they been practicing, and were they looking at you sort of thinking, what right do you have to
Sure.
totally change the way that we have all been educated? You created a whole new paradigm on how to make an orthotic.
Correct. Yeah. Dalton McGlamory was the editor in chief. He probably didn't believe in orthotics, but there's a couple other editors out there. But yeah, that was it. I was an upstart. They were the establishment, and so when I showed the letter to Merton Root, you know, who was used to being criticized his whole career, and his ideas, and he read the letter and just laughed and said, "Rich, get over it tonight. You know, we'll have a glass of wine." It's like, but not the letter, but the article. When I showed him the article, so that was 35 years ago. So I've Titan, I can say that I've gotten over it by now.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're over it as well.
Maybe a little bit.
So once you did that article, though, how long do you think it took before it became a little bit more accepted?
Within months. I mean, I lectured from 1986 to 1993 during those 7 years. And I regret some of it because, you know, I had 2 small kids at home, but I was on an airplane. There wasn't Zoom meetings in those days. You flew everywhere and you stayed everywhere 4 or 5 days. And I have a very loving, forgiving wife. So for 7 years, every weekend, or not every month, I was somewhere lecturing. I got to come down to your wonderful country in January of 1990. So that was in Adelaide. It was wonderful. But it was a wonderful period, and really it finally in like 1993. So after the 7-year blitz of doing everything I possibly could, I said, you know, I've got to get back to being a family man. So I then went 14 years sort of under the radar. I lectured at the podiatry school, but I didn't turn anything away, but I didn't seek any. I would have liked, you know, if you had like emailed me, Tyson, I would have like probably, I didn't see that email.
Yeah. Because I know like even the book that came out in 2019, Inverted Orthotic Technique, you still kept your name off of it. You still don't call it the Blake Inverted Orthotic Technique?
Right. I've been. So
they when they spanked you 35 years ago, that's still burnt in your memory.
I still have scars.
Yeah.
You know, I'm Catholic too. And you know, there's a lot of religions that have, you know, we've lived with guilt and humility. We're supposed to be humble.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a background in my life too of like trying to be humble, trying to like
But with the book, you had the perfect opportunity to finally put your name on there and just say to them, you know what, I've done it anyway. Because a lot of people still refer to it as the Blake inverted orthotic technique. And,
and it's interesting you say that, Tyson, because until now, I wrote that book 2 years ago now. I never once thought about calling it the Blake. I never once. It didn't even come into my brain, which is slowly dying anyway. But
yeah. So what you're thinking when if somebody doesn't come up with something and they do attach a name to it, do you think they should attach the name, or you think they shouldn't attach a name, or you've still got too many scars to comment on that?
Oh, I think it's totally individual. I don't mind if people call things by their name.
Okay, so I want to ask another question though. Prior to writing the book in 2019, which I assumed had already been written way before that, it wasn't until just recently I realized that you didn't write the book until 2019, but you wrote a book before that, Secrets to Keep Moving, in 2016.
Yeah, so that book was, well, I didn't do that book very well. These are all self-publishing books, which is wonderful. I like the self-publishing part. I've submitted things to book companies and they laugh at me. So I prefer to do things by self-publishing. But in 2015, I wrote this book that's 900 pages. And it was a combination of things for patients, of things for podiatrists, and sort of a third like for people who may want to learn more about feet, like physical therapists or athletic trainers or running shoe stores. But it was too big and too expensive, so I actually took out the podiatry stuff, the stuff that I really felt podiatrists, and I'm actually working on that now. I've got book number 3, Tyson, for next year.
And that's going to be self-published as well?
Unless you know a publisher who would do it. It's already 500 pages, but it's only for podiatrists.
Yeah.
And it's just my type of podiatry, what I do, fits a small group of podiatrists. So, I've been working on that for a few years, and it all started with secrets, and I just took some of the sections out. But in 2000, it was sitting on my computer, and in 2016 I had a stroke training to walk the Camino de Santiago in Spain.
Yeah.
And
how were you then?
Which I finished in 2009. I finished that walk in 2019.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I had about 3 months to rehab from the acute symptoms of my stroke. So I sat at my computer and I finished the book Secrets, because I can't sit still.
How old were you when you had the stroke?
I had the stroke at 62, maybe 62.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's way too young.
I have to do my math. 62, yeah, 62.
Yeah.
So that was a shocker. I have a heart valve that I may need to be replaced someday. So as you get old, are we going to get into my conversations I had with Abraham Lincoln later on, Tyson?
I would love to. Yeah, that'd be great.
I sat with him for months and months, right before his assassination. So I'll be able to talk about that also. So when you get old like me, you know, it's like it's time to write between strokes, or you know.
between operations. I was told
Between,
that if I've got to get my aortic valve replaced at some stage,
yeah.
and yeah, long story behind it. Anyway, but I can do whatever I want until that happens.
You too?
Yeah. So, Ben, I remember saying to the surgeon, oh yeah, so when they do this, well, it'll just be like a day surgery thing or something, and not even thinking about the extent of what they were going to do. He says, oh no,
Yeah.
no, we're going to crack you open. Yeah, we're going to crack you open like coconut. We're just going to split you. He said, and then we're going to get in there. And he's telling me the whole thing, and I went, so well, how many days is the recovery? He's going, the longer you leave it. Well, he said, the older you are when you get all this done, the better. He said, because it is a real messes with your lifestyle. And he knew that I was writing as well. He said, well, put it this way. When it happens, you can have a lot of time to write.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah.
I went, oh, there's a positive.
Yeah. 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 So, okay. So we're both in the same boat, basically. We both may need our aortic valves replaced someday.
Yeah. What's yours? Mine is because it's a bicuspid instead of tricuspid valve.
Okay. Yeah. Mine's because it's stenosis.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, too much calcifications, you know, there.
No, they did a calcium score on my heart all the way around it.
Yeah.
And they said 10 is you're going to be put in a box very soon. 0 is just amazing. So they did the calcium score and it came back, and I'm hanging out for the phone call, because I wouldn't say I've lived a totally healthy life. And it comes back and they said your score is, and it surprised us as well, is 0. They said, wow, all your lifestyle choices have really paid off. And I went, there you go.
Yeah.
And my brother
Wow.
was just shaking his head going, no way. He said, that has to be a mistake.
Yeah. There's always a relative that's going to say that.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know. But other than that, I'm healthy. So you're heading into, like, you did the, we were talking about the books and the inverted orthotic technique. What, can I just ask you one question? I only had one question actually written down, because I don't normally write questions down, because I just like to see where the conversation goes. But one question I did have down was, what's your thinking on, say, podiatrists that don't like orthotics? I don't know if that's a tough question or a crazy question.
We have one in my office who's a surgeon,
Yeah.
and she does not do orthotics, and she and you know, orthotics are just one part of how we treat patients. And you know, working in a multidisciplinary setting that I've had the luxury of seeing, you know, how MDs would treat the same injury as I do.
Yeah.
And also physical therapists on referral from the primary care, they'll treat the exact same injury and they'll do fine. With, you know, so who knows if my success rate is better than, I'll throw out, you know, Craig Payne or Simon Bartol or, you know, who knows, you know. I think it's, if you try to be good at something, you try to, you know, get, perfect it as best you can and do the best for your patient as you possibly can. And, but if you don't like orthotics, you can become the best ultrasounder and start giving stem cell injections and use a lot more physical therapists, you know, and you can attack the same thing from multiple areas. So it's be hard to say one is better. I know for a fact that, you know, using orthotics in a stage 2 posterior tib tendon dysfunction, you can prevent, or at least eliminate for years and years them having to have their surgery, and that's a wonderful thing. So I know there are places that orthotics are really crucial. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Ron Balmasi. He was the West Coast guru on children's flat feet. And, I watched him for years. He would cast for metaductus and clubfoot and all his braces and everything. And the role of custom orthotics for these flat-footed children, I mean, it's incredible to watch them outgrow their flat feet now. You can say, yeah, maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have. But I can't imagine treating children with flat feet when everybody agrees that they're not going to outgrow it without a custom orthotic, and especially the inverted orthotic in my mind. So there's niches in there that you'd hope the podiatrist who doesn't like orthotics just refers them to the person who does.
Yeah, that was a good answer.
Do surgery, and I flood the people that if I think the people that work with me don't do the surgery on my patient as good as somebody else, I'll refer out to somebody else. I always try to get the person to the best, the patient to the best person.
No, it was a good answer, because I know when I graduated in '88, and then so many decades after that, it was having an orthotic was like the only treatment. Anytime a patient came, it didn't matter what they came in with, you treat it with an orthotic. And I remember Simon Barthold doing a talk on the Sunshine Coast, I think it was, and he was up there doing his presentation, and he said something along the lines, and it sort of stuck in my head. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I think some podiatrists even think orthotics may fix hemorrhoids. And I said to Simon when I was talking, and he was at Port Douglas a couple of months ago that I caught up with him there. I said, that presentation still sits. He said, so everything you've ever heard me say, the only comment you can remember is that hemorrhoid joke. And I went, that's fun. But the point he was making was,
that's great.
Yeah, orthotics can be used in so many things, but some people think they can just be used for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And then I've noticed over probably the last maybe 5 to 8 years, where there's been a bit of a swing and a shift where people are starting to look at alternative treatments, other therapies, strength and conditioning. That has really taken hold. And there's the thinking in podiatry has changed a lot in regards to orthotics.
Yeah, you can the whole, barefoot movement, whether you agreed with everything they said or not. I always like to find the good parts of any theory that makes sense to me. Throw out, try not to be a cultist and throw out what but I'm talking about that with my patients all the time, because I'm using a zero drop shoe, for knee pain. I'm using an elevated heel for Achilles, a more traditional shoe. I'm getting patients now to vary. I want them more in, not just stuck in their Brooks addictions or Brooks, they're really elevated heels, but alternate the heel heights and not get. So anyway, that's the only plug I'll do for this new book is just what that's all about. Is like, so I had this patient who came in, and the doctor wanted to fuse. The patient had big toe joint pain, and his podiatrists wanted to fuse the big toe joint, that they felt that they would get the most stability. And the patient was about 45 years old and a pretty active runner, but was having big toe joint pain. And I said, well, what has the podiatrist offered you? And she goes, well, they made me orthotics first, and that helped a little bit. And then they gave me a cortisone shot and told me to ice the joint, that I have some arthritis in the joint. Send me to physical therapy for 2 sessions to learn how to wiggle my toes. That's per quote unquote for the patient's perspective. And when I came back and complained that I was still having problem, they said, well, you've gone through all of our criteria of helping you. So the next thing is actually to fuse your joint. So you might as well speak to my scheduler on your way out. And so I was so frustrated at hearing that from a fellow podiatrist that I went home and I wrote down, everything I do to help big toe joint pain. And I probably after a couple glasses of wine, I stopped at 28. I got it up to 34 things, that I actually commonly use. Every month I'm always playing with different things to help somebody, so that's the basis of it. It took me actually 7 days, or probably about 15 hours, to write the big toe joint pain chapter.
And how many bottles of wine?
Yeah, we won't go there. We won't go there. No confessions tonight. But my recent liver tests came out fine, though. I was very happy to see it. I didn't want to fall to COVID alcoholism.
No, you got to be careful of that. So with just getting back on the inverted orthotic technique.
Yes.
So you said for 7 years you went out there and you put in the hard yards. You did the travel. Yeah. You got on the speaking circuit. You spoke. You even came to Australia, which is great. Went to Adelaide, which is a great city. Not that I'm from there, but it is just a great. It is a really good city. Then you said you had a huge break for about 14 years.
Yeah.
That you sort of, was that because you were over all the travel, or were there other things going on that made you realize, stuff it, I've had enough?
No, it was actually my family. I just got to the point where, because when you're not lecturing, you're preparing for your lecture, and this has nothing to do with private practice, right? You're still seeing your patients, you're still doing all your work for your practice. This is all like your hobby. So my hobby during that 7-year period was the inverted orthotic and lecturing about it and traveling all around. So in 1993, I had a 10-year-old son and a 5-year-old son, and teenage years looming ahead. And I said, no, I've got to be I've got to be a father to these kids. So I became a basketball coach because I love basketball anyway, and a baseball coach because I'm really good at baseball, not good at basketball, but so I coached my kids for I had a 13-year run as working on father, the award of Father of the Year award. I never won it, but
yeah, I've come runner up a couple of times.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I did, and then it wasn't until both of them are off to college in 2007. I get an invite to speak at the University of Virginia on the inverted orthotic, and I said, "Oh, that's that's neat. And I called him up and I said, you know, it's been years since I've talked about the inverted orthotic. Do I have to do a PowerPoint? Because I just have slides. And he said, no, we do PowerPoints now. So I had to learn how to do a PowerPoint in a couple weeks. That really wasn't too bad.
I thought you were going to say you still had the overhead projector. Yeah, the overhead projector. You used to put the thing on top of that.
Yeah. So when I came down to Australia, I had a bag of 3,000 slides, and we first flew to Fiji, and we stayed on a little island called Treasure Island.
Oh, I've been to Treasure Island. How good is that place?
Yeah, it was great.
It is a fantastic place.
But when we left, we had to walk in the water, and the guy who picked up my bag with 3,000 slides, because we still hadn't been to Australia yet.
Yeah.
He throws the bag. It's like Tom Brady when he threw the trophy over, if you saw that after the Super Bowl. He throws my slides. I'll still remember going, oh no, and the guy expertly caught it in the boat. But
you know what, that brings a smile to my face is because I remember arriving on Treasure Island and leaving Treasure Island, and the funniest part about it is it's not like any other island where you pull up in a jetty and you get out nicely. No, the boat just pulls up and you have to jump out into the water to get in. And then when you're getting back on, so if you were wearing nice shoes, they're going to be wet.
Yeah.
it's a fantastic island.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to my story.
Yes.
So anyway, so I was invited to speak at the University of Virginia on the inverted orthotic, and they had started to evaluate it and had found that it had a really positive effect on all the knee motions. They had a 3D system there that supposedly was pretty good. So they had already experimented with it, and they wanted me to come out, and so I said, how long should my presentation be, hoping it would be, like tonight's podcast, an hour or so. And they said, well, you'll speak Friday from 8 to 4, and then the guy from University of Virginia wants to give his research, and then if you wouldn't mind, on Saturday, could you do the same thing over again? And and I like to tell jokes and everything, so I gave. It was the first time I've ever done. It was actually 9 straight hours of inverted orthotic, because they ate lunch while I kept talking, and then the next day I had to a totally different audience. I had to give the same talk again, and I was saying the same jokes, and I go, this is Groundhog's Day over. But it got me back in the saddle after that much time off. I was, once I started talking, I guess you can see I have no problem talking, Tyson.
Oh,
but
no, I think it's much better. Yeah, it's much better to have someone on that talks than someone that doesn't talk.
Yeah.
Because when you ask
no trouble talking anyway.
Yeah, when you ask a question and they go yes, and that's it. It's really tough. So did that sort of reignite the passion to get back and start talking more about your work?
Yes, it's really funny because if you talk at a seminar, then people will see that you're talking, and it will generate. So next year, I gave 5 different talks, including to our California state meeting, and it's snowballed ever since. It's just been,
I think it's great. But I also like what you said about you got to a certain point in your career that you gave your family their time. And I remember doing something very similar when I had 5 clinics at one stage and traveling 1,800 kilometers around different places. And I remember I was on the phone one night and my daughter was 6, 5 or 6. And then she asked me a question, Daddy, why are you away all the time?
Oh,
And it just broke my heart.
yeah,
And I pretty
yeah,
much that night made the decision that I was going to sell all the clinics and just have one. And that's what I eventually did. And no regrets whatsoever.
yeah,
Because when I sat down and thought about why was I doing it, I'd forgot
yeah,
why I was doing it.
yeah,
And yeah, and sometimes I think family, yeah,
yeah,
you gotta think about your family.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember when my second boy was 3. So it still took me a couple more years to stop lecturing, but
Yeah.
I, I hadn't seen him all week because he was always asleep. And I got home Friday night, about 8 o'clock, and my wife goes, his name's Christopher, and I go, she goes, I just put Christopher to bed. I think he's still awake. Go up and say goodnight to him, as wives do. And so I run up there and I say, Christopher, good night. And he looks at me with his big brown eyes and he goes, I hate you, Dad. So I think that, that was the first thing. It still, it still took me 2 years to
Yeah.
like really recognize it inside of my, my weird brain. But
But I saw something I was on your Facebook page because you always got to do a bit of stalking before you talk to somebody. And I think you had a video there. You were teaching your grandson to ride a bike.
yeah.
And you know what? And what's funny, when I saw that video, I just brought back all these memories. My daughter now, who's 16, who I'm teaching to drive, I remember teaching her to ride a bike. It was very, very similar video to yours. And I just went, those sort of memories are the ones you will carry for the rest of your life. Yeah. When you're on your deathbed, I'm going to be thinking about the day I taught my daughter to ride a bike, the day, those days I was teaching my daughter to drive. I'm not going to be thinking about the orthotic that I made and fitted on John Smith. That's going to be the furthest thing from my mind.
Yeah, good, Tyson. I agree with you. Good for you. Yes, we have our second grandson
Yeah.
due this month, so we're waiting for William Christopher Blake, and our first one, Henry, is 5.5, who you saw doing the bike, and tomorrow we're taking him to the San Francisco Zoo. With my schedule, I have Wednesday off, so I'm going to be at the zoo with Henry, and I get to relive those. I mean, like, oh boy, they are so fun. And we should just skip our kids. Grandkids are like the best, especially if they live close, but still, they're still the best ever. And
It's because you can give them back.
yeah, I know, you just give them back. We're like, we babysit for like 4 or 5 hours and we sleep for 2 days.
Yeah, well, someone told me the reason grandparents and grandkids get on so well is because they have a common enemy.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
So, Richard, before we finish up, I
Yes.
usually ask this question everyone at the end, and it's just, if someone's listened to this whole recording, they've got all the way to the end, or they're watching the video, is what's one final tip you give to anybody who's listening to this, whether it's a career tip, or orthotic tip, could be a family tip. Have you got one piece of advice you'd like to finish up with?
Well, I think because this is podiatry, I won't tell you how to change diapers, but it's really, and what I tell the students that I teach is like, find what you like to do and follow that. I think when you first start practice, you know, you have to do a lot of things just to make the bills, you know, but you slowly learn. If you didn't have something before, you learn to do the things you like, and that's gonna, you know, be what you focus on in life, and it'll bring you the most joy. If you deal with things that you don't like, and which a lot of doctors do just to make bills, they get so burned out and so unhappy, and I've lived through some partners that, you know, the only thing they could think about is what their stocks were doing. And we'd interrupt them to see patients because you know, they were burned out on seeing patients, but they still wanted to see what their stock was doing, and that's not a way to live. It's like, find what you're passionate at, and it could just be patience. I tell you, you know, we were only sports medicine till at our clinic. You could only come in if you were an athlete.
Yeah.
1992, and then they, because of recession, they let non-sports medicine patients come in, even patients for me to cut their toenails. And I learned, it's just the patients I loved. So I really didn't care. I never looked at my schedule. I didn't care who they put on my schedule. I knew I would have a fun time talking to them and enjoying them and learning from them. So I know we can't, with HIPAA laws, I can't tell you who I've seen, but there's been incredible people that come through your practice.
Oh, I tell you, you could do a podcast just on incredible patient stories.
Yeah.
That you sort of just go, that I was on actually somebody else's podcast who had a podcast about amazing stories. And
Okay.
one of my patients many years ago was one of Al Capone's hitmen.
Okay.
And I'm like, holy shit, serious? Because what happened? He came in, he had these holes in his leg, and I said, that's an odd shape for a pitchfork. And it was just a joking comment. He said, no, that wasn't a pitchfork, the bullet holes. And I went, okay. I said, I don't have a patient next. Let's take some time. Can you tell me this? He said, he takes me through this whole story about how he was a hitman for Al Capone, and then as we went all the way through it, and I said, so how did you get the bullet holes in your leg? Oh, he said that my wife had to put a contract out on me in 1972, and I got out of my car. Yeah, so I got out of my car. My son got out of the car. All of a sudden, this car pulls up in front. These two guys come out shooting at us. So of course, I pulled my gun out, and so did my son. I'm going, yeah, of course, because that's what you do when you're out for a drive with your son. He said, and all of a sudden, a huge gunfight broke out. He said, and yeah, I got shot in the leg 3 times. And every time he was booked in, I booked out an extra half hour after his visit just to tell me more about what he used to do and how he got away with what he got away with, and just his stories. And I was like, oh, it was so good.
I've just as long as you don't cut his nails too short.
Oh, yeah. He was, like when I saw him, he was probably, be 90 or something by the time I saw him. He's pretty old.
Oh, yeah.
But he was still an intimidating old man. The sort of guy that I'm thinking, I know you're really, really old. I think I could probably take you, but I really want to find out because you're intimidating as all hell. And with the stories you've already told me, you'd have no problems killing me on the spot, probably.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, Richard, I want to thank you for coming on the Podiatry Legends podcast, sharing part of your story. I think it's been fantastic. And I think everybody would have got something just listening to the passion you've had for what you've done, and even just some of those like little career shifts and slight deviations you've taken, but you've still stayed on a path that you wanted to follow.
Well, thank you, Tyson. Yeah, I've enjoyed my career and have never looked back. So podiatry has just been wonderful, and I appreciate you having me on. it was wonderful.
No, it's been fantastic. Thank you. So that's right. I'm just going to, I've ended the audio recording. So that's finished. The video is still running. So anyone that's hung around to all the way through the video, thank you for hanging around. And I'm going to stop the video now, and then I'll say goodbye to Richard in my own time. So thank you, everyone.